power is scary. When you think about other people getting a lot of power, whether that's political power or power in wealth or becoming so incredibly famous and well-known, you start to think, maybe we should find a way to dial that back. And the idea is, or the worry is, I guess, that for human beings, often our character doesn't match the amount of power that we may have or not have. But if power is scary, so is weakness. I don't know about you, but with a lot of the responsibilities that I have, I look at them and think, I'm not sure I'm up to this. I'm not sure I have everything within my human ability to do this. I mean, some things like eating breakfast are just fine, but other things, it seems like some additional help could really be needed. And that's because inherently I am just a human being. Now, this is something we don't talk about much in churches. We don't talk about power, and people outside of churches don't really know a whole lot about the power that church could talk about. It's not really something that they think of. It's not something that we use when we talk to people outside and say, well, what we're really interested in is power. And yet, Jesus is the key to the most powerful force that you will ever meet. Hey everybody, welcome to the Sanctus Forum. I am Michael Stewart Robb, better known as Mike, and you're watching one of the videos in the Conspiracy Commentaries where we talk about Dallas Willard's book, The Divine Conspiracy, just section by section, so often it's not more than 2 pages at a time, and the 2 pages that we have for today are titled God's Rule Extended Onward Through Us. And I hope that these are helpful for you, and if they are, do hit those like buttons, or if you're listening to the podcast, it'd be wonderful if you would rate this with a 5-star rating, or would write a review in places where you can do that, and that just helps other people find this thing. Yeah, so this section here is, if you notice, the last of a larger section in the first chapter. And it's the whole thing is called Word from a Different Reality. And Dallas Willard is trying to give, I don't know, maybe you can say a new interpretation, but a sort of different look at Jesus and what he brought into the world. And now he's at the end of that. And if you remember in the previous section, at least in the previous episode, I talked about 2 levels of invitation. The one is talking about the kingdom of God being available for Jesus, and then Jesus being able to do things for other people. But the second level is this idea of the kingdom of God being available through Jesus, because it's also available for us. Now, this is going to repeat itself here in this section, these 2 levels of invitation. And in the first part, he's going to talk about how the kingdom was available for Jesus, and so that when Jesus acted, he acted with God. And then, second paragraph, he's going to talk about how that is what Jesus intended for us to also have access to. When we receive God's gift of life by relying on Christ, we find that God comes to act with us as we rely on him in our actions. So that idea there of rely on, that's another one of Dallas Willard's words for faith. He actually has a few. He does kind of tend to like to choose different words to get at the same reality. He'll also talk about having confidence in, he'll talk about counting on, obviously believe, and talking about faith, talking about relying on Christ, points out that this power that I was talking about before, this power is a personal power. It's not like electricity, which you can kind of take and use and do whatever you want with it. You can electrocute people or whatever, cook your toast. This is a personal power, which means, obviously it's God working it. And so God as a person makes choices. God thinks about things. He thinks about things wisely, which means that he's not going to find himself in the position of being used. Now, this is a really important message for those of us, which is really all of us, well, almost all of us, who have responsibility in this world. Because the basic human condition is one of weakness. And even the sorts of powers that we can cultivate for ourselves, whether that's some sort of political power or wealth, or whether that's contacts that we have or some sort of notoriety, these sorts of things are also very limited in how you can really accomplish good and influence people. They're not worthless, but they don't really get the job done. And when you stand up in the morning, you can be confronted with quite a bit of human frailty or weakness. And that's where Jesus's gospel, his second level of invitation, can come in and say, hey, I can help you with that. How about I connect you with the most powerful force that you will ever meet? Now, of course, there's a caveat there, a qualification, which is Jesus and God aren't all that interested in pouring their power into people who don't have great character. And so these two things tend to kind of go side by side. On one hand, an interest in developing the character of people on the earth, and on the other hand, trying to give them, seriously, as much power as they can. And I think sometimes, actually quite often, God withholds power from us. He doesn't open doors for us. He doesn't make certain things possible for us because he is far more interested in developing our character. So I want to look at one last thing here, and this is this idea of being greater than John the Baptist. Dallas Willard gets this out of the Gospels. He talks about how those who are least in the kingdom of God are greater than John the Baptist. And what Dallas Willard really is talking about is power. The idea is that because of the relationship that we can now have to Jesus, we can have greater and, let's say, easier access to the power of God than John the Baptist could have. Well, we've made it here to the end of this larger section on Word from a Different Reality. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Then with the next video, we'll be turning to this next section on made to rule and on what a kingdom is. And I look forward to talking with you again. See you then.